Hi, everybody. Hello, hello. Great to see some familiar faces, some familiar names. I am Jen Wilson. I'm the Director of Programming and Advocacy with New England Museum Association, and I am joined by my colleagues Heather and Amy, who are in the office today and up in Arlington. We are so happy to have you here today for our Small Museums PAG, in which we will be talking about managing collections. Because we have a lot of ground to cover, I am going to hand it right over to our PAG chairs, and I'm going to hand it right over to Samantha. It's all yours.
Hello. So thank you for attending this session, as Jen mentioned. Today we're going to be talking about collections on a budget and creative ways that you can help take care of your collection. We do also want to go ahead and talk about a featured small museum. It's something that we started last week, which was you guys are welcome to nominate a small museum which you think has it could be for collections, it could be for programming, really anything that you think a small museum has been successful at and deserves to be recognized for. Um, so I think we can just jump right into that, Louise and Doria.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Lauren is going to be doing a presentation on that. I believe you work at the Roch Jones Stuff House.
Yeah, I do at the Roachstone Stuff House and Garden Museum. Um, I am fairly new here, and I'm the community engagement coordinator here.
So feel free to jump right into
Yeah.
it.
So I have a PowerPoint here. All right. So the Roach Jones Duff House and Garden Museum. We're a historical museum preserving New Bedford history, New Bedford, Massachusetts, where we're located. Um, it chronicles the lives of three different families that lived here: the Roaches, the Joneses, and the Duffs. Roach Jones Jr., William Roach Jr., Edward Coffin Jones, and his daughter Amelia Jones, and Mark Duff. They all lived here in the house between 1834 and 1981. Um, and they lived through the golden age of whaling, abolition era New Bedford, all the way up until 1981. Our mission, the Roachstone Stuff House and Garden Museum, enlivens New Bedford history, gauges our communities, enriches cultural understanding through stewardship, education, and entertainment. Um, we do a lot of programming here, and that's what I want to talk about most because that's my position here. I do work within the programming, and so a little more background. We're currently right now celebrating our 40th anniversary of being a museum. And so we have a lot going on this year to celebrate that. Starting as a preservation vessel, we have really just built into this proactive community, cultural community standpoint. Everyone in New Bedford has an RJD story or knows about the RJD. Um, we host an entire city block of green space because the museum and the house sits on this acre of garden space. And it is home to programs like concerts and theater and educational programs and tours and weddings and everything else under the sun. And inside, people come for tours, people come to just to spend a rainy day. There are indoor concerts and a lot of other exciting things. It is a national historic landmark, partner with the New Bedford Whaling Museum, and it's open year round. Um, so a touch on the programming that we do. We host about 70 programs every year, and most of them are free due to grants and other programming stipulations. With their schools, we offer free field trips, and like I said, even adults always remember their field trips they have here, and what we get to do with the students are really exciting. We have like beekeeping programs in the garden and um, other exciting things for the students that they come through the house and they get to enjoy. And the green space in the middle of the city is something that a lot of the people around here really love. So like I said, one of the things that we love here is the school trips and the things that the students get to come in, experience the history one on like really hands-on. And all of these school trips are completely free. So we get to have it's a really great experience and um we are able to offer this to all of the schools in our area. Concerts are very popular at the museum inside and outside. The inside are host to like chamber music and like really intimate experiences in the parlors. And then outdoors, the New Bedford School has their annual jazz concert here in the lawn under the big tent. It's really, really lovely. People love the ambiance. And again, these are all free or donation based. We every summer have a local theater company come and do a free production of Shakespeare. Um, and these often sell out. People really enjoy it. Um, these are done underneath, outside in the garden, under the tent. So outdoor Shakespeare in the park. Um, and it's all under a very accessible mission of producing Shakespeare for the masses. So we also produce these, in the past, have done like makers markets, and we've worked with organizations like Buy Black New Bedford for Juneteenth markets. Um, and so you can see that we like go out into the lawn, into the gardens, under the tent. Um, um, we just get people from all over our community here. We also This is a really, really great place for weddings. People love to get married here. One of the big things when people talk about the RJD is people say, "Oh, I've been to a wedding there." It's a great place, people, for a perfect place for small and intimate, non-traditional weddings. And because we have small spaces here, and it's our wedding season is really throughout the summer because we have this beautiful rose garden. We have all the different flowers that bloom throughout the late spring, early fall months. So people really flock here for the beautiful photos and the atmosphere. And we have just so many more things that we are able to offer for our community in programming. Like we have parties, we do lectures and talks, we have family fun events, and we every week we have something happening here, and it's just never a dull moment. Looking ahead, we have a lot of really exciting wins for us. We just are finishing up a grant-funded project to make our grounds more accessible at night with adding lighting throughout the grounds, and it's really, really beautiful. Um, it's just about getting finished up, and I'm really excited. We're planning a big party for it to invite everyone else out at night so that they can see it all. And we also received a grant to do our whole website, have a whole like redo of our website. And so by the fall, hopefully, we'll have a whole new website to talk about everything that we've been doing. And another thing that has just occurred is like my whole position. I'm fairly new to this position and the organization as well. But my position of community engagement coordinator is new so that we can continue the mission of community engagement and find new opportunities to engage and benefit our community and our patrons, and really just to keep extending that hand out. Um, our community really benefits from our institution because we're always looking for ways to just invite people in. Like the facade of our building looks a little imposing, but we really always have an open door, and just an open garden, and we always want people in. And like I said, whether touring, it's because they've come in for a tour, or they spent an afternoon in the garden, or they've just come to a program or been on a field trip, people in New Bedford always just have an RJD story. And that's the Roach Jones Duff House. So, and there's another shot of our beautiful rose garden. So, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Lauren. And I just wanted to add on that your social media page is constantly posting something, which is incredibly helpful to small museums. Having even a slight presence of even a couple posts a month, it can really help boost you to a new audience. And something that I even do, not necessarily at Storden, because we have someone who takes care of that, but for the house that I volunteer for, we have some regular posts, and then I share it out to all of my different community pages because most towns and cities have some kind of forum. So I'll send it out to the surrounding towns around me, their forums, and it's a really great way to get some new people to actually see your museum. So I just wanted to comment on that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the next portion of our presentation, unless Dory or Louise, you had something that you wanted to add. I think we were just going to jump right into the collections on a budget. Okay. And
Okay.
again, thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Okay, let me go ahead and
And
share my page.
well, I think, didn't we decide that I'm going to just say a few things about what not to do before you tell us what to do?
Well, so the we were going to do a presentation for that. I have it all broken down on the page.
Ah, okay.
And eventually it'll present. There we go.
Okay.
And the way that we're doing this is a bit of a do's and don'ts. So the very much, this is going to damage your artifacts, but also if you don't have the full resources to preserve something like the Smithsonian might, here's something that you can do that's not necessarily the full, I'm going to damage my artifacts. And we did have a bit of a page dedicated to the Roach Jones Duff House, so I just wanted to highlight that again and some of the things that they do. And why don't we jump right into the do's and don'ts? So Louise, something you had mentioned was not storing artifacts in cardboard boxes.
Yeah, one of the things I just want to throw in there is to let people know that I'm with the Museum of Bad Art, and we do have a collection that is notoriously unvalued by anyone but us, and that we also started off as amateurs and figured out some things we never did figure out. We still store artifacts in cardboard boxes or plain old plastic bins, but we're working on it.
Something that you can do because even us, so Storden is a part of a larger organization, but we run a whole agricultural fair, so we can't devote all of our resources to caring for our rather large collection of artifacts. So something that we have to do, while we do have some of the gray artifact specific boxes, what we have found is that we can utilize cardboard boxes and line it with acid-free tissue paper. So that way we're hopefully preventing some of that damage and then utilizing plastic bins to help waterproof if you have no other waterproofing options. And again, just being sure to protect it with other layers. There are even fabrics that you can use for certain artifacts that are safe. So there are definitely safe ways to use cardboard boxes and plastic bins. You just have to get a little bit creative with it.
We store a lot of our things in a garage and in an attic, and these are places that we don't have enough control over the environment. And we are getting away from that and finding a way to put more controlled environments. But again, it's not the ideal way to store anything.
Yeah, that goes right along with not storing artifacts off-site in a private location. You can also store artifacts in creative places, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend having your curator take home artifacts or yourself taking home artifacts because one, you're utilizing space in your own home that you probably need, and two, even if you don't think yourself and your curator will end up stealing the artifacts, because no one goes into it with that intention. Unfortunately, you never know what will happen with their family. You never know what future curators might want to do. So that may set a dangerous precedent for the future. What you can do is find creative artifacts on your own property where the museum is at, and then you can also store them off-site in specific locations and have a contract in place because that protects both your collection, your museum, and the people who are storing them. Maybe a local business, a local fair, for example, has buildings where they don't use them year round. Is there a way that you can store them there and have a contract in place to help protect yourself? So that's one of the ways that you can store them safely in a private location or even at your own museum.
I just want to throw in a little note about that because it's so true that for small museums, we're not always able to do everything at like, according to best practices that the large museums follow. And sometimes it takes, years before we're able to get everything in the kind of storage that we want. And it's a process, or you don't necessarily have everything exactly where located where you'd like it to be. And again, it can take a lot of time. And I know for my small museum, the Rosemary Beck Foundation, the thing that's helped is just to make sure that you have a really good inventory system, which for us, frankly, like good old fashioned spreadsheet. I kind of feel like I'm, one of those, master in the sheets types. Like maybe not master, but like I'm pretty good with the sheets. And as long as I know where things are, that's so critical. Because if you lose track of where something is, then it's almost like it's lost. So even if it hasn't quite yet gotten to the spot or into the type of enclosure that you'd really love it to be in, and that's your goal, as long as you know where it is, that like it's more likely that it will eventually get to where you want it to go safely.
And the thing that I'd like to add to it is we do finally have a lot of our collection in safe, suitable storage. And it was just asking a company that has a big storage operation if they could give us one of their big vaults to use. And they said, oh, sure. And so
Mhm.
just ask.
Oh yeah. It's
Yeah.
amazing how often for-profit institutions can sometimes come through and be helpful.
Yeah. And a lot of the times, even if they're just doing it with the intention of, I want to look good for the community, so they
Sure.
do business, take advantage of that. Because again, as long as you have a contract in place and you have an inventory of what's going there, and you do semi-regular checks just to make sure your artifacts are still safe, it benefits you and it does benefit that business. So,
It's
um,
amazing how often for-profit places will
yeah.
come through with some kind of a nonprofit
Hmm.
discount. And they may not advertise it, but if you ask, a lot of times they'll be like, oh, sure, we'll give you a nonprofit discount. Like Talus, located in New York City, which is where my location is primarily stored. When I asked them, they were like, yeah, we'll give you guys a nonprofit discount for ordering Talus boxes, like artifact boxes and things like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was awesome. So yeah.
Yeah. Louise, did you want to go into the next point?
Yes, we early on knew that we had to somehow track the pieces that we were adding to our collection. And the first thing was that people were with a Sharpie writing a number on the back of it. And, a Sharpie number is hard to change. Then somebody came up with the improvement to use a piece of blue painter's tape and tape that to it, which was a little bit better, but you still have to think about what surface are you taping to. And it's just something that needs to be thought carefully about what kind of objects do you have, what's going to work. Yeah, just it's different depending on what you're looking at.
Yeah. And so some of the things that you can do, because even myself and our program assistant, we've been diving into the collections, much like other small museums. So many hands have been on the collection, and no one's had time to actually finish a project. So there are so many different labeling techniques happening. You don't want to tape because you don't know what adhesive type it is and how that's going to degrade the artifact. So you're like, oh my God, how can I label this to know what I have? Some of the things that you can do are tie on paper labels as long as you're using the appropriate material. For textiles, you might think, I don't want to touch this, but you can actually tack something on with thread to the textile. A lot of the times, that's the safest way to do it is just using very, not super tight, not damaging the textile, but a very simple stitch for the cloth label, even just the corners. That can be integral to labeling that artifact. And you can also, say you're using a pencil, you can use that to write the identifier in something like a book. That is somewhat common practice for organizations where you're not totally destroying the integrity and you can change it. So those are a few things that you can do. Of course, this is just a few different things. Everyone has totally different artifacts that are going to need different methods, but it's a good starting point.
I just want to do a plug for something that I learned about from another small museum person because some years ago we have in our art collection we also have a number of textiles, and the original collection manager um, had just kind of used safety pins to like attach paper labels to these, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? And I was freaking out. And the person who I spoke to said, in a pinch, what's better than safety pins, which are bad, is actually dental floss. You can use certain types of dental floss, not minty, not flavored, not minty, but like a plain dental floss. There are certain kinds that you can use that are, I mean, okay, so maybe it's not best practices, but I would put that into the category of better practices. Like, given a choice between like a plain unscented, like a non-dyed dental floss to just loop and attach a paper label to a textile, as opposed to say a safety pin, which is going to rust over time. I mean, that's that would be a better practice. So we were able to eventually figure out like something even better than that. But like that was a really useful thing to know. And if it had come to that, we could have done that and it would have been an improvement for our collection. So dental floss, look into it.
And one of the things that we're going to do once we kind of go through these slides is open it up for discussion after, just so
Hmm.
we can all talk about different methods that we use. If you have a question about, do we think this is okay to do it this way, we will have time for that at the end. Um, Dory or Louise, did you have something you wanted to add to this slide? Okay. So moving on to the next one. Okay, yes, I didn't skip anything. Louise, did you want to talk a bit more about this?
Yes, one of the things that that was a problem early on is we would have a volunteer who would look at something and say, "Oh, you know what? I could clean that up, or I could fix that." Um, just no, unless you have reason to think this person knows what they're doing, or you can talk it through with them at least as to what they're doing. You can't just let well-meaning people um, try to help in that way.
Yeah, and what you can do is offer training because we can't all do anything. A lot of us are volunteer organizations. I'm a staff member at my museum that I work for. But again, I do volunteer at another historic house, and we're all volunteers there. So I mean, you're gonna have to at some point have volunteers help because again, you can't do everything, especially if you're volunteering. You have a whole other job. So offering some kind of training, even if it's just the basic handling of artifacts, and here's what you can use to clean it. You supervise them once or twice, and then you kind of let them go off. That way, you know that they know what to do because again, you don't want just anyone to touch it because then they think that they can touch it all the time, and then it muddies the waters a bit. So offering training and making it very clear what the maintenance and cleaning is and that you have to request them to do it first, those can be ways to safely have people touch and maintain your artifacts.
And I'd just like to add, so we have a situation right now where we have a painting that requires mold remediation, which we would need a professional conservator to do that. And we found two young professional conservators in our area who are willing to do that, and they're just getting started out with their careers. So they offered us a really, really low price, thankfully, to do this mold remediation that we needed. And not only that, so we have an artist in residence who we have essentially a barter system who does work for us, collections care work. And they weren't trained specifically in conservation work, but they're going to essentially kind of apprentice a bit with these conservators who are going to basically demonstrate and teach them their techniques for mold remediation with some of these artworks while they're doing the work themselves. So, in that way, our volunteer on the spot is going to get training in safe handling and mold remediation while the process is happening, and all for a really low price. So that's the kind of thing that it's worth taking a little time to try and work out, because we're getting a really great deal out of that. And then our as part of our education mission, our artist in residence is going to get that training.
Louise, did you want to hop on to the next point?
Yes. Again, early on, as our collection grew, and when we got to about 800 pieces, we realized we had three pieces that were entitled Madonna and Babe. We had two reclining nudes, and we had two pixies. And since most of our pieces are anonymous, it didn't help to say that the artist's name, but we realized that we had to come up with something. What we came up with is we just put a 1, 2, or a 3 after them in our internal documents. But you've got to um, make sure that you have names that titles that help you find it, not that confuse you and say, which did you mean, the little Madonna with the blonde? Yeah, I mean, it just got crazy at one point.
We have
And
an art collection. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to
oh,
mention that the
yeah.
RBF has a really large art collection, and we have like tons and tons and tons of works that are just labeled. They're just called untitled.
Oh,
So what we do, what are you gonna do? It was just untitled. But each one has a unique numerical identifier. So, there's maybe you'd have like number 367, which is untitled, but then there's also number 872, which is untitled. So that's how we distinguish between them, just to make sure there's a numerical thing in there. And that way we don't have to change the title or lack of title, which was set by the artist, but we know what's what.
Yeah. And I'm sure we all have this issue, whether it be three of the same kind of silver spoon, or five almost identical teacups. It gets to us, or maybe it is 15 chairs that have the cane technique on them. And you get to a certain point where you're like, how many different times in different ways can I describe a black chair? There's just only so much you can do. So by appropriately giving identifiers to your artifacts, appropriately labeling them, and then having some sort of accession document, it helps you know which one you're talking about. So like right now, I have two books in front of me that are the Three Bears. They do have different colors on them, but they're pretty much almost identical. But through appropriately labeling them and having appropriate locations, because theoretically these could be in two different parts of my museum, and it's like, well, okay, well, which one do I need? Um, so by having appropriate locations on those succession documents, those aren't public facing, those are all internal, but it helps you get there with them. That's really, you don't need to worry about the fact that you have 10 shares that are labeled and have the same title to them. You can just put small black chair, one like cast iron, no, like it, you don't have to worry too much about the title of the artifact as long as you have an appropriate label and identifier for it. Um,
and
Louise,
that
did you want
that
to go into
yeah,
the?
that gets to the thing that, in again, looking at the Museum of Bad Art as an example, we are all volunteer, have been since the start. I've been there since the start. That's 30 years. So there a piece will come out or be talked about when I will say, oh yeah, that was the piece, and I remember meeting the donor or some story about it, but it's not written down anywhere. So I'm trying and I'm trying to get others to when those things come up to get it documented in a way that's connecting it to the piece. And Doria's thing of using a spreadsheet, we have been using a spreadsheet. We're now over 900 pieces, and we've got 2 locations, and we've got to go to a collection management system. So it does cost something, and it takes some work, but that's going to let us take all of these details and connect them to that one piece, which is so important.
Yeah, and different ways that you can do this. Say you're like, I just can't, I can't get a grant to do this. I can't afford a collections management system. I don't even know where to begin. I know there are lower cost ones where it requires more work on your end. I believe Collective Access is an example of that. That's one that we use. So it required a lot of upfront work on our end, but it's been pretty helpful, and we didn't have to spend a ton of money to get a system that was already kind of set up, and we manage it on our end, so we don't need to worry about going to an exterior company for maintenance. We can do that in-house. But if you're like, I can't even do that, I don't know, I can't get a server, I can't do those things, you can use recordings, you can have digitized note taking. Google Docs is free to use. I mean, you do have to pay for additional like memory and storage space, but for the most part, it's free to go in and use up until that point. So you can use that to write down, document, or if you had mistakes revealed in audits. Like we have a collection that's the 1960s. We have a part of our collections that's called the 1960 series. Fun fact, those were all accessioned in 1975. Every artifact that's in that 1960s series was accessioned in 1975. What I think likely happened is we got them in the 1960s, but we didn't accession them until 1975. So things like that, where now we're discovering that. So we're making sure that we have on paper, this is the issue that happened. We've changed their identifier to reflect that. So now it's 1975X, reflecting that it's got a different number to it. We have the past identifier associated with it. That way, because if we can't change the number that's on the artifact, because like Louise had mentioned, at least her museum, things were not labeled correctly. So we don't want to go and do further damage. So utilizing things like that where it is lower cost, you do have to pay for storage space at a certain point. You could even do paper if you have the storage space for a few filing cabinets. You can go completely on paper, and you can have CDs for your recordings, but having any form of information written down is better than nothing. Doria
Yeah,
or Louise, did you?
capturing it after the fact. If
Mm.
you somehow get a new connection with a family member of a donated item, or the artist, or people who, you have to also have things set up so that you are open to adding information about any object.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I
And
mean, for me, I do love my spreadsheet so much, and I just keep adding cells and things to them and adding notes as I learn more. Because very often a work that we've had a lot of our works for many, many decades. And sometimes I'll learn critical facts about them, 50, 60 or more years afterwards. And so it's so important to have a little spot where you can just like write in a little note. Definitely that point of, don't count on your memory for everything. Like you really don't want to have everything just in the head and mind of one or more people. You want to like tap those resources and get them into
yeah.
some form, and don't be afraid of paper or things that are written down. And redundancy is good too. If you have certain things both on paper and like digitized, great. So much the better.
We
And
have one
something,
category of information that emerged over the years, and that is in our collection, which is now almost 900 pieces. Sometimes as soon as we acquired something, we could see that it was inspired by some classic painting. sometimes years later, someone says, "Did you know that there's a painting in the Frick that is exactly like this that must have been the inspiration?" And just having the things open enough so we know that, oh yes, we need to put that, that's an inspired by. We need to capture that. But we find that it is one area that we are doing better at getting hold of this stuff, but that it makes our collection more interesting and our jobs more interesting to be capturing as much as we can about the objects that we have.
And one of the things that you can do, say you're like, I don't want to keep this issue happening in the future, have an acquisition form if you don't have one already. Starting it at any point is better than never doing it. And I would be happy to share the language that we use for ours. We have a bit more of a unique collection, so we need it to kind of frame all of that. But having an acquisition form protects you in the long run. So someone's heir can't say, hey, this person died and now it's a part of their estate. They were just loaning it to you, so I want that back. Or they never meant for you to keep it long term. They just donated it to you then and wanted it back. They can't say that. You have the form that also says you don't have to do anything with this artifact except store it. That's a part of it of whether we make you a verbal or written note of, hey, we're going to use this then. They can't come back and say, I expected this to be out. I want the artifact back if you're not going to use it. That acquisition form, having them sign off on it, stating no matter what, there's no guarantee that we can present this artifact, again, protects you in the long run. So
Mm.
that's another way that you can, in a Google Forms, again, is free. So that's another method that you can use. Did Dory or Louise, did you have something you wanted to add to this slide?
So
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Did I not do something else? There we go. Um, so I did also want to put in talking about those policies. Um, there is more to deaccessioning and accessioning than meets the eye. You don't have to accept everything into your collection. We have so many spinning wheels and chairs. I don't want another spinning wheel and chair. Now, if this spinning wheel was owned by Betsy Ross and that was the one that she used to weave the fiber and spin it down to make the original American flag, that's a cool story. I'll take that spinning wheel if I can confirm it. But I don't want their grandmother's spinning wheel that they were clearing out the house. They don't want it. No, I don't want your 14 chairs that you're clearing out of your attic. I have enough. Um, and along that same line, deaccessioning can also be a bit tricky, especially if you don't have that acquisition form. Even museums that have done it properly have come under some fire. So you really have to make sure that when you're deaccessioning it, you're doing it properly and you're doing it for a reason. And like if there's another museum that can take it, offer it to them. If you can avoid throwing it, and obviously if it's a rusted thing where you're like, I don't know, like this is falling apart, or all I have are these random pieces of a thing that I think go together, but it's just all pieces of china that broke apart. It, there's no one you can really give that to. But just be careful that you're deaccessioning correctly.
let me
And
again
we've
jump in there with the Museum of Bad Art. As you can imagine, people want to send us all kinds of junk. And we actually do have criteria. It needs to be sincere art, it needs to be interesting, the curator needs to want it. But we do end up with a lot of things that we don't want. And we came up with a wonderful way of deacquisitioning, which is every once in a while we have a rejection collection auction, and we auction off the things we don't want. And each piece comes with a certificate that says this was rejected by the Museum of Bad Art. And that's been fun. And we get rid of some of the paint by numbers and the craft kits and things that people have sent us, that we really don't want. So, but we are in a unique position.
I just want to piggyback onto that. And I think what Louise is sort of talking about, what we're getting at, and we're working on this right now, is a collections policy. Because it's the acquisition form and deaccession is very, very important. but we actually now are going to have a collections policy because this has come up with us a lot. People will retire or downsize and they'll just want to just donate like a bunch of stuff to us, a bunch of art, and we don't have the capacity to take everything, which, that's the small museum situation, right? It's like we can't just take everything.
And
Um,
they get
but
insulted if you say, we don't want it.
Right. But if you have a collections policy that's very, very specific and says we can only take this, we have to do this, da 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 da, then you can be like, well, here's our collections policy. Sorry, we can't take everything. And there's a whole thing. And for some people, there has to be a committee that decides on each and everything before it is in there. For us, because we're small, it's just the board of trustees has to sign off on anything or everything. And there's just a lot in there about whether or not there's going to be monetary support because it takes money to store and care for these artworks. And if any of them have conservation issues, we don't have tons of money for all of that. So we're not in a position. And generally speaking, we're kind of letting people know, and that's front and center in our collections policy. We are not primarily a collecting institution. So that means like we're not out there looking to collect people's things. So now we have that kind of formulated in a collections policy that we can share with people if they ask, well, can I donate these 17 works of art to you? And we'll say, well, not really, no. And here's why. And then sometimes we do help people place artwork in appropriate places.
And all of this goes into not everyone needs full-time access to your artifacts, and it goes into collections care too. If you accession too much, then you can't properly care for your collection. And you have to determine ultimately the level of importance that an artifact has, because having it out on exhibit does cause is like you can try to limit the damage as much as you can. Ultimately, there will always be some amount of degradation to the artifact, no matter how hard you try. So if it's something that's super important, maybe you don't have that on display full time. So that
Mm.
all kind of wraps in. So you need to determine how important an artifact is. And that leads into unique storage solutions for a limited space. We talked a little bit earlier about storing things, and ultimately, if you are storing an artifact somewhere, make sure you do have the ability to properly secure the space when it's not manned by someone. Um, the picture here is of an ox sling that is far too large to put in any other building than our blacksmith shop. I'm not sure we'd even be able to get it out of the blacksmith shop. It was probably put in here when the building was moved from New Hampshire to our grounds in 1928 or 1929. We're not getting this out of the building, but it's the perfect storage location, and we can lock our blacksmith shop afterwards. And again, this all goes into consider the monetary value, the condition, how educationally valuable is it? If you have an incredibly rare piece of art or book, you probably don't want to put it on display no matter how educationally valuable it is. It's really all about what's important to your institution, and also making sure that the space that you're using long term, you can store them in one place and not just have to move it around every few months.
And for
Um,
fragile works on paper, by the way, that are very sensitive to UV light, consider the possibility of making a digital copy for display purposes, which you can periodically replace if and when it fades or whatnot. A lot of times it's gotten less and less expensive to make digital copies of things. And another element of that is that means you can often share those digital images online for people to look at and not even have to worry about printing it out or anything like that. And then people, if it's a good enough quality copy, people can zoom in, you can add different kinds of information. So making things digitized in that way. And that, of course, potentially expands your audience beyond just the people who are able to show up to your place, which is for us, physical access is such an issue to our space. It's invitation only because of where it's located, yada, yada. So having that digital access is really critical, I know, for us.
um, and I did just want to provide some resources. If anyone wants a copy of the presentation, I'm happy to send that over. However, it's also being recorded too. There are some oral history resources to help protect information about your collection, how things were done. So I have a bunch of resources here that go into talking about that, as well as resources about different organizations that you can go to. A lot of these organizations have the best practices listed on there, and from there you can determine, okay, what can I do for the best practices, and if I can't do any of these, or if there are ones that I want to get towards, but I can't fully, how far can you commit to it? Like I mentioned, you don't want to put something directly into an acidic cardboard box, but you can line it with acid-free tissue paper to limit the contact to it as much as you can. So there's a whole bunch of different resources for you to determine what you can handle, and what is at least like writing with a pencil instead of a Sharpie. That's something super simple to label a book. And that's something that they recommended. So that is all I have additional recommended resources. All of these are places where you can go to. Of course, NEMA is one of them, but there are a bunch of different resources where you can reach out to them and ask what they're doing. They may have professional affinity gatherings like us where you can become a part of it and learn what others are doing. And that is actually now the end of the presentation. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. And I did put in the chat a link to our small museum nomination form in case anybody wants to. But I think now is a
Yeah.
good time to open it up to discussion. If
Yeah,
people
we
have
always
questions.
every month our goal is to have a different featured small museum. So if you have a small museum that you really like, which might be yours, feel free to nominate. And who knows, your small museum might be our monthly special feature. So yeah, I think with that in mind, we want to kind of open things up to the floor, to see if anybody has questions or their own special sort of like budget hacks, like things they've figured out. Like my favorite one is using dental floss instead of those awful metal safety pins. So if anybody has something like that, it's sort of under the theme of, if not best practices, better practices. So if you have a better practice, we'd love to hear it. Oh, yes, Liz Larson, feel free to unmute.
Yeah, hi. I actually have a question for the group. Does anybody have a written policy for what to do with unsolicited donations? We're a historical society. Most of the time they're paper, and as we don't collect ephemera, we take those over to special collections, but occasionally somebody will mail us an object that we don't want. Do people have policies on how to handle those? Like, I don't
Ooh,
want to pay the shipping to send it back to them.
right.
I'd
That's
like
a
to hear
good
what
question.
people have, how they handle that.
Yeah, my understanding is that there are different laws in different states that cover this issue of yeah, unsolicited donations. And so I think it has to be, I think you actually have to look it up state by state to see what the laws are in your particular state. But I think my understanding, and I remember researching and learning about this, is that every state has its own specific policies of what to do with unsolicited donations to museums, and what the policies are for deaccessioning them, just offloading them if you don't want to accession them. I think Maryland has like a particularly difficult one, for instance, but most others have something where like you might need to potentially like if you don't know who gave it to you, because sometimes people will just show up to a museum and just drop something off, and then you're like, oh gosh, I have this thing, what do I do? There are some states that say that you have to advertise in a local paper and say, this thing was given here, can somebody come and take it back? And then if you don't get a response in a certain amount of time, then you are free to deaccession it. That's often a policy. But you'd want to, and I don't have the precise link, but you'd want to Google that and see what your state specifically mandates.
In terms of how to deal with the person, how to respond to that when you get it, What we've done, Liz, is send a note if you know who it is, send a note saying, using almost what Doria was saying early, our accession policy
Collections
doesn't
policy.
fit with
Yeah,
this. We can't use not
right.
It's not in line with. We can't use this piece. Do you want can we can dispose of it, or if you want it back, tell us how you're going to ship it or something, putting it on them. If you want it back, you're going to have to pay for the shipping. Or if
Mhm.
you want to, we'll dispose of it, whatever that
Yeah,
means.
if they make it a free and clear gift that allows you to dispose of it in any way you see fit without necessarily accessioning it.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Um,
that using the issue of our accession policy as
Right.
a way to not say, what are you sending me this junk for? Right.
I actually run into this issue quite a bit because we're an agricultural fair. We have a creative arts department. We also have lots of different shows here year round that we don't necessarily run the show, but we have other shows coming on our grounds and we're just the host site. Um, Something that we run into is people will leave behind what they've entered into contests and they're like, oh, you can have it. And we will tell them, we don't want this. If you leave it behind, it will be thrown away. Because again, if they're just they offer to give it to us and we're very clear and sometimes they do just leave it behind and we try to contact they just leave it behind with no note. And we contact them, we say that to them. And I mean, we have gotten responses in the past where they're like, yep, just throw it away. I don't want it. But that's at least what we do in that end because we do get lots of things left to
Mm.
us, unfortunately.
I can imagine it might make sense for some museums to actually have a sign that says, we do not accept unsolicited donations. And here's what we do with them, yada yada. But again, you'd want to just check on what your
Yeah.
state's laws are for specifics of that sort of thing. But yeah,
And
and having that collections policy or accessions policy to just sort of show people like, oh, this is what it says. My hands are tied. Sorry.
on our website, we have, along with our please donate money if you can support us. We have it. Do you want to donate art? Please tell us. Send us when we write. It's like a form. Send us a photo. Tell us about this, and we'll let you know if this is something. And that has headed off a
Yeah.
lot of the unsolicited stuff that we used to get because people send it and then the curator says, yeah, thank you so much. This doesn't fit with our current collection, whatever, something very polite, but no, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's a
Was
great
there
question,
anything
though.
else?
Wow, we are almost out of time, I'm realizing. This was a very
Yeah,
rich session.
yeah, and I don't think there's anyone else who's bringing anything up. So, given that we're so close, I think we can probably wrap it up.
Yes, and so our next session will be Tuesday, June 24th at noon. And now I'm totally blanking on what our theme is. It will be some exciting small museum related theme.
Jen
And
actually hopped ahead of you.
So I dropped some links in the chat
oh,
because in this
great.
conversation there were a lot of upcoming NEMA events that may be of interest to this group. So first and foremost, the next Small Museums PAG will be on June 24th at noon, and it's on basic graphic design. The
That's the
registration
one.
in the chat, so feel free to sign up for that. I'll also send it out in a little bit. And then the day after that is also our Ask the or our Conservators PAG does a quarterly session called Ask the Conservators, in which for about an hour they answer questions. They bring in an expert from the conservation field. So if you are interested in frames for painting specifically, Allison Jackson will be talking about that on Wednesday, June 25th, also at noon, and just an opportunity to ask, what can you do on site? What's better for a conservator handle? But that may be of use of interest for this group in particular. Our historic sites PAG in October. So if you want to refresh on this, we'll also be doing a collections 101. So if you're at a historic site and you're interested in more, the random things you find in a historic building, join us in October. And then last but not least, registration's coming up for this. If you have any Indigenous objects in your collection, we will be hosting a couple of Q&As on NAGPRA policies. We'll have one in July and one in August with some partners in the field. So registration for that is upcoming, but all things that may be of interest collections wise, especially for small museums, as you're, figuring out what is in your collections, what to do with your collections. Yeah. So, and as always, feel free. I'll drop my email in the chat. If you ever have any questions, feel free to email me or anybody at NEMA, and we're happy to help connect you to our PAG chairs, either for small museums or beyond.
And don't forget to nominate your favorite small museum as a possible feature for our next episode. Thanks all for joining. This was great.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Samantha. Thanks, Louise. Thanks, Doria.
Thank you.
Thank you all.